George's world tilted into chaos, the metallic tang of blood mixing with the earthy scent of wet pine as the vehicle groaned to a halt against a cluster of boulders. His heart hammered against his ribs, each beat a desperate plea for this to be a dream, for the man beside him to stir and laugh it off like one of their late-night Seattle bar stories. Instead, silence swallowed them whole, broken only by the relentless downpour drumming on the crumpled roof. In that suspended moment, as water seeped through the cracked windshield, George reached for Alex's hand, cold and limp in the dark. This was supposed to be their escape, a weekend carved out from the grind of city lights and unspoken doubts, where love could breathe without the weight of prying eyes or half-hearted commitments. But now, pinned in the wreckage of their borrowed freedom, George whispered into the void, "We're getting out of this. Together." It was a vow, fragile as the first aid kit rattling in the glove compartment, but it anchored him as he fumbled for his phone, the signal bars mocking him with their emptiness. Back in Seattle, 3 days earlier, the air had hummed with possibility. George Harlan, 32, architect by trade and dreamer by nature, had stared at his reflection in the fogged-up mirror of his Capitol Hill apartment, towel slung low on his hips, wondering if this trip would finally bridge the chasm between him and Alex. They'd met a year ago at a queer art exhibit in Pioneer Square, Alex's laugh cutting through the murmur of wine glasses and whispered flirtations like a beam of unexpected sun. Alex Rivera, 29, with his olive skin, cropped black hair, and eyes that held the restless energy of someone always chasing the next horizon. He was a freelance photographer, the kind who captured the raw pulse of urban decay in grainy black and white frames, but off-camera, he was a storm, charming one moment, distant the next. George had fallen hard, the way you do when someone sees the cracks in your carefully constructed life and doesn't flinch. His own world was steady, a corner office overlooking Elliott Bay, weekends volunteering at the local LGBTQ youth center, evenings lost in sketches of sustainable homes that blended into the landscape rather than dominating it. But Alex? He was wildfire, igniting George's quiet routines with spontaneous drives to the coast or midnight confessions over cheap bourbon. "You're too safe, George," Alex had teased once, fingers tracing the scar on George's forearm from a childhood biking accident. "Let me show you how to burn." The invitation to Olympic had come on a whim, Alex's idea after a particularly grueling week of rain-soaked shoots. 2 days, no signal, just us and the wild, he'd said, packing his camera bag with lenses that promised to immortalize their stolen moments. George had hesitated, the rational part of him citing deadlines and the irrational fearing rejection. But love, that stubborn beast, won out. He'd cleared his calendar, stocked the Jeep with craft beers, Esmore's fixings, and a playlist of indie folk tunes that spoke of open roads and unspoken longings. As they crossed the Tacoma Narrows Bridge that Friday afternoon, the Puget Sound glittering below like shattered glass, Alex had leaned over, hand warm on George's thigh. "This is us, babe." Rewriting the script. George's chest had swelled, the word babe still feeling like a gift after months of tentative touches. They stopped in Port Angeles for oysters and IPA, laughing over how Alex's dramatic retelling of his last bad date involved a guy who collected taxidermied squirrels. By dusk, as they wound into the park's embrace, the forest closed around them like a lover's arms, towering cedars draped in moss, ferns unfurling secrets in the understory. Their cabin was a rustic A-frame on the edge of Lake Crescent, the kind of place Airbnb romanticized with wood-burning stoves and clawfoot tubs. George unloaded the gear while Alex set up his tripod by the water, capturing the mist-shrouded peaks as the sun dipped low. Dinner was pasta with wild mushrooms foraged from a guidebook's map, eaten cross-legged on the porch, feet tangled under a shared blanket. The conversation flowed easy at first. George's latest project, a eco-housing co-op for queer families in Ballard, Alex's dream of exhibiting in New York, far from Seattle's comforting drizzle. But as the stars pricked the velvet sky, the undercurrent surfaced. Alex's phone buzzed once, twice, then silenced with a flick of his thumb. "X?" George asked lightly, pouring more red from the box. Alex's smile faltered, "Just a flicker." "Nah, just work. Some editor chasing deadlines." George nodded, but the seed of doubt took root, watered by memories of Alex's vanishing acts, nights unaccounted for, texts left on read. Still, when Alex pulled him close, lips tasting of salt and wine. George let himself drown in the heat of it, bodies moving in sync on the creaking floorboards, the world reduced to gasps and the rhythm of rain starting to patter against the panes. Morning brought clarity, or so George thought. They hiked the Marymere Falls Trail, hand in hand where the path allowed, Alex snapping portraits of George against the cascade's roar. "You look alive out here," Alex murmured, framing George's face through the viewfinder. "Like you belong to the earth, not some blueprint." George's cheeks warmed, the compliment landing deeper than any physical touch. They picnicked on turkey sandwiches and trail mix, feet dangling over a mossy log, sharing stories of first loves, George's high school crush on the debate team captain in Boise, Idaho, stolen kisses in the library stacks, Alex's college fling in San Diego, a surfer boy whose waves crashed as hard as his temper. By afternoon, they drove deeper into the Hoh rainforest, the Jeep's tires crunching over gravel as the canopy thickened overhead. The air was alive with the drip of perpetual moisture, ferns brushing the windows like curious fingers. Alex pointed out a banana slug, iridescent yellow against the decay, joking it was their spirit animal, slow, slick, unapologetic. George laughed, the sound echoing strangely in the green gloom. That's when Alex suggested the detour, an unmarked spur off the main road, a secret spot he'd read about in an old forum, promising a secluded overlook with views of the Pacific's distant haze. "Trust me," Alex said, eye sparkling with that boyish mischief George adored. George did, turning the wheel onto the rutted path, the forest swallowing them whole. The conversation turned intimate, vulnerability spilling like the creek beside them. George admitted his fear of forever, the way his parents' divorce had wired him for flight over fight. Alex listened, then confessed his own ghosts, a father who called his coming out a phase, a string of relationships sabotaged by his own restlessness. "You're different," Alex said softly. "You make me want to stay." It was those words that echoed in George's mind as the deer charged, the impact a brutal punctuation to their fragile peace. The Jeep's airbags deployed like white ghosts, filling the cab with acrid smoke. George coughed, vision blurring, but instinct kicked in. He unbuckled, wincing at the sharp pain in his side, cracked ribs, maybe, and checked Alex first. A gash above his temple wet blood, but his chest rose and fell. "Alive! Thank God." "Alex," George rasped, shaking his shoulder gently. No response. Panic clawed up his throat, but he shoved it down, scanning the dash, key still in ignition, engine dead. The embankment dropped steeply to their right, a tangle of roots and mud 20 feet below. Above, the road curved away, empty as far as the taillights pierced the storm. No choice. George grabbed the emergency kit, a flashlight, and Alex's camera bag, why, he couldn't say, slung it over his shoulder. With effort, he hauled Alex free, draping his arm over his neck, half carrying him up the slope. Each step was agony, mud sucking at their boots, rain blinding. George's muscles screamed, but love was a fierce fuel, propelling them inch by inch. At the road's edge, he laid Alex down, propping his head on a rolled jacket, and bound the wound with gauze from the kit. "Stay with me," he murmured, pressing his lips to Alex's forehead, tasting salt and fear. Lightning forked the sky, illuminating the isolation, miles from anywhere, night falling fast. As thunder rolled again, George straightened, resolve hardening like the chill seeping into his bones. This trip was no longer about romance, it was survival, a test of the bond they'd sworn to each other. But in the back of his mind, a whisper, what if this was the moment everything unraveled? He didn't know then that the real storm was just beginning, not the one raging overhead, but the one brewing in secrets long buried. George's breath came in ragged bursts as he paced the roadside, the beam of his flashlight slicing futile arcs through the sheeting rain. Alex stirred faintly, a groan escaping his lips, and George dropped to his knees beside him, relief flooding hot and sharp. Hey, you're okay. We're okay. Lies, perhaps, but necessary ones. Alex's eyes fluttered open, glassy with pain, focusing on George's face like it was the only anchor in the tumult. "What happened?" Alex mumbled, fingers twitching toward the gash on his head. George caught his hand, steadying it. "Dear. We went off the road." Jeep's toast down there. He nodded toward the void, where twisted metal glinted sporadically in the flashes. Alex tried to sit up, wincing, and George eased him back. Don't move. I've got signal, barely. Calling for help. But the phone betrayed him, bars flickering to 0 as he dialed 911. No service, George said, voice steady despite the knot in his gut. Alex's laugh was weak, bitter. Of course. Murphy's Law for lovers. He reached up, thumb brushing George's jaw, a touch that carried the weight of their morning's tenderness. We hiked in worse weather in the Cascades, right? We'll walk it off. George forced a smile, helping Alex to his feet. Leaning on each other, they started down the road, the forest a black wall on either side. The storm howled, wind whipping branches like accusations, but their pace was slow, deliberate, Alex's limp forcing halts every few minutes. Conversation was sparse, broken by breaths and the squelch of soaked boots. George recounted a story from his Boise days, the time he and his brother built a fort in the backyard during a blizzard, pretending they were explorers lost in the Rockies. Kept us warm till Dad found us at dawn, he said, hoping the nostalgia would distract. Alex squeezed his arm. Sounds like you. Always building shelters. There was an edge to his tone, something unspoken, but George let it slide, focusing on the faint glow of distant headlights that never materialized. After what felt like hours, but was likely 30 minutes, they spotted a signpost half obscured by vines, Hoh River Trailhead, 2 miles. Cabins that way, Alex pointed, but George shook his head. Too far in this. We need higher ground, maybe a ranger station. Doubt gnawed at him, the map in his mind was fuzzy, pieced from Alex's casual directions. They pressed on, the road narrowing to a single lane, potholes pooling like ink. Thunder masked a new sound, a low rumble, growing insistent. George froze. You hear that? Alex nodded, eyes widening. Engine. Someone's coming. Relief surged, but as the vehicle crested the rise, its high beams pinned them like suspects. It was a battered pickup, rusted fenders, and mud-splattered plates, slowing to a crawl. The driver, a burly man in his 50s with a salt and pepper beard and flannel shirt, leaned out the window. You folks all right? Looks like you dance with the devil out here. George stepped forward, shielding Alex instinctively. Accident. Down the bank. Need a lift to the visitor center. The man, introduced as Harlan, no relation, he chuckled, eyed them appraisingly, gaze lingering a beat too long on their linked hands. Hop in. Name's Dale. Live off-grid a few miles back. Storms like this play hell with the critters. The cab smelled of damp dog and pipe tobacco, heater blasting warm air that steamed the windows. Dale chatted amiably about logging days and black bear sightings, but George caught Alex's tension, his free hand clenched in his lap. Thanks for this, George said as Dale dropped them at the Calalock Ranger Station, a squat building with flickering fluorescent lights. Oh, you won. Dale waved it off, eyes twinkling. Love's a wild ride, boys. Hold tight. He rumbled away, taillights fading into the night, leaving George with an uneasy prickle. Inside, the Ranger, a wiry woman named Tessa with a no-nonsense ponytail, patched Alex up properly, confirming a mild concussion and sprained ankle. Jeep's recoverable tomorrow, she said, handing George a cup of stale coffee. Helicopter if needed, but you're lucky. Another mile, and you'd be ghosts. They crashed in a spare bunk room, the cot springs protesting under their weight. Alex curled against George's side, head on his chest, the rhythm of his breathing a fragile lullaby. Close one, Alex whispered into the dark. George stroked his hair, inhaling the faint citrus of his shampoo mixed with antiseptic. Yeah. But we're here. Sleep came fitful, haunted by dreams of falling, of hands slipping from his grasp. Dawn broke grey and sodden, the forest steaming like a living thing. Tessa arranged a tow for the Jeep, but it would take hours. Explore the beach while you wait, she suggested. Driftwood art, seals if you're quiet. George helped Alex hobble to the overlook, the Pacific crashing below in frothy whitecaps, gulls wheeling against the slate sky. They sat on a weathered log, sharing a protein bar, the salt wind carrying whispers of normalcy. "This place," Alex said, snapping a photo of a crab scuttling sideways, "it's got stories in the bones of it." "Like us?" George turned, catching the vulnerability in his profile, the way his lips parted as if to say more, then closed. "What is it, Alex? You've been off since the crash." Alex's shoulders tensed, then sagged. "Just the hit to the head. Making me maudlin." He leaned in, kissing George slow and deep, the world narrowing to the taste of him, the crash of waves echoing their pulse. For a moment, it was perfect, love-defiant against the elements. But as they walked back, Alex's phone, salvaged from the wreck and now buzzing with delayed signals, lit up with a text. He glanced, face paling, and pocketed it quick. George saw, but said nothing, the seed from last night's sprouting thorns. Lunch was take-out clam chowder from a beachside shack, eaten in the Jeep salvage yard while mechanics clucked over the damage. "Frames bent, but drivable," one said. "You two got guardian angels." By afternoon, they were rolling again, Alex insisting on the cabin despite his limp. "Can't let a deer ruin our getaway." The drive was quieter, the forest's hush amplifying the space between them. George fiddled with the radio, landing on a station playing Bon Iver, the lyrics about skin and hollering a too-perfect mirror. At the A-frame, they collapsed into the tub together, hot water soothing bruises and silences. Alex traced the map of George's ribs, fingers lingering on old tattoos, a compass rose inked during a post-breakup bender, symbolizing direction found. "You're my north," Alex murmured, but his eyes darted away, shadowed. Dinner by firelight, chili heated over the stove, stories swapped to fill the gaps. George spoke of his mom, a schoolteacher in Boise who sent care packages of homemade jerky and queer-lit paperbacks, her quiet pride his bedrock. Alex shared less, vague tales of his mom's passing young, a stepdad in Tacoma who didn't get it. The fire popped, casting golden flickers on their skin as they made love on the rug, bodies urgent, reclaiming what the crash had stolen. Afterward, tangled in sheets, George whispered, "I love you." Alex's reply was a kiss, wordless but fervent. Night deepened, the storm's remnants tapping the roof like impatient fingers. George woke to Alex slipping from bed, phone in hand, silhouetted by the bathroom light. Muffled voices, too low to catch, then silence. He feigned sleep as Alex returned, curling close, but trust frayed at the edges. Morning brought forced cheer, coffee on the porch, watching mist lift from the lake. They planned a gentle hike, Alex's camera slung around his neck like armor. But as they ventured into the woods, the path veering toward the river, Alex paused at a fork unmarked on their map. "This way," he said, voice casual. Shorter cut to the falls. George followed, unease stirring. The trail grew overgrown, ferns clawing at their legs, the air thickening with something unspoken. A snap twig behind them, deer, George told himself. But when Alex's phone buzzed again, and he silenced it without looking, the mystery called tighter. Love, it seemed, was entwining with shadows neither had named. By midday, the falls thundered ahead, a curtain of silver against the gorge. They stood at the edge, mist beading on their skin, and for a heartbeat, George believed they could outrun whatever haunted Alex's gaze. Then, from the tree line, a figure emerged, Dale, the truck driver, rifle slung over his shoulder, smile too wide. "Fancy meeting you here, boys. Trail's tricky. Need a guide." George's blood ran cold. Coincidence? Or something more? Alex's hand tightened in his, but his eyes, those restless eyes, held a flicker of recognition. The fight for survival had just gained a new, human face. The roar of the falls drowned George's pulse as Dale approached, boots crunching moss like brittle bones. Water sprayed their faces, cool and insistent, but it did nothing to quench the heat rising in George's chest, a mix of protectiveness and the sharp sting of suspicion. Alex stepped forward slightly, blocking George's view, his voice steady. "Dale! Didn't expect company out here." Dale's grin split his beard, eyes crinkling with what might have been amusement or malice. Park's full of surprises. Heard voices on the wind, figured I'd check. Bear's been bold this season. He patted the rifle's stock, a casual gesture that landed like a threat. George scanned the man, faded Carhartt jacket, jeans caked in mud, a tattoo peeking from his cuff, an eagle, wings spread in jagged ink. Not a ranger, not a hiker. What was he? We're good, George said, forcing calm, his architect's mind mapping escape routes, the narrow ledge to the left, steep drop to the river right. Just heading back to the cabin. Dale nodded slow, gaze sliding between them, lingering on Alex's bandaged temple. Rough night, eh? Roads get mean. But you're in good hands now. He unslung a battered thermos. Coffee? Black as sin. Alex accepted, unscrewing the cap, the steam carrying a bitter, grounding scent. George waved it off, watching as Alex sipped, throat working. Thanks, Alex said, handing it back. Appreciate the save last night. Dale's eye sharpened. Save? Nah, just neighborly. You two city boys stick out like sore thumbs. Seattle plates on that Jeep, bet it's got stories. The small talk stretched taut, a wire ready to snap. George itched to pull Alex away, but the path behind Dale looped back through dense underbrush, his presence a blockade. Instead, he asked, "You live nearby?" Dale chuckled, low and rumbling. Off the grid, like I said. Solar panels, rainwater barrels. Name's Dale Whitaker. Used to log these woods before the eco-freaks shut it down. His tone soured on the last word, eyes flicking to George, the architect, the builder, with unspoken judgment. They parted awkwardly, Dale melting into the trees with a wave. Watch your step. Fools take more than they give. George exhaled only when his footsteps faded, grabbing Alex's arm. What the hell? You know him. Alex rubbed his temple, wincing. From the pickup. That's all. But his evasion rang hollow, the text from morning burning in George's memory. The hike back was tense, silence heavy as the humid air. Ferns brushed their legs like warnings, birdsong mocking their discord. At the cabin, George busied himself with lunch, peanut butter on crackers, apples sliced thin, while Alex fiddled with his camera, downloading shots to his laptop. Beautiful stuff, George tried, nodding at the screen, a close-up of dew on moss, ethereal and untouched. Alex's smile was brief. Yeah. Captures the fleeting. Afternoon brought a fragile truce. They kayaked Lake Crescent, the water glass smooth under a tentative sun, paddles dipping in unison. George's shoulders burned from the effort, but the rhythm soothed, the slap of oar, the call of loons, Alex's occasional laugh when a fish leaped nearby. Remember our first date? Alex asked, trailing fingers in the wake. That awful improved show in Fremont. You heckled the alien sketch so bad, they pulled you on stage. George grinned, the memory a balm. You loved it. Said I had stage presence. Alex's eyes softened. Still do. They beached on a pebble shore, stripping to boxers for a swim, the cold shock stealing breath but sharpening senses. Bodies collided in the shallows, playful at first, then heated, kisses tasting of lake water, hands mapping familiar terrain. Emerging dripping, they wrapped in towels, drying by the fire pit as dusk crept in. But the idol cracked over dinner. George found the phone charger tangled in Alex's jacket, the device lighting up unbidden, missed calls from Jay, texts layered like accusations. Where are you? We need to talk. Don't ghost me again. Heart slamming, George pocketed it, waiting till Alex stepped out for wood. When he returned, arms full of split logs, George held it up, screen glowing. Who's Jay? Alex froze, logs tumbling. George, it's not work. Not an ex you mentioned. The words hung, sharp as axes. Alex sank to the couch, head in hands. It's complicated. Old friend. From before us. George paced, the cabin shrinking. Complicated how? You said no secrets on this trip. Alex looked up, eyes raw. I know. But Jay is tied to my past. Stuff I'm not proud of. The confession spilled haltingly. Jay was Javier, a former lover from Alex's San Diego days, now a private investigator sniffing around Alex's freelance gigs. I did some side work, Alex admitted, voice low. Corporate espionage shots, nothing illegal, but shady. Jay's his fixer. He thinks I double-crossed him on a job. George's stomach twisted. And the texts? While we're here, fighting for. It's over, Alex cut in, standing, closing the distance. I cut ties months ago. For us. His hands cupped George's face, thumbs brushing stubble. I swear. George wanted to believe, pulled into the kiss that followed, desperate, reaffirming. But doubt lingered, a shadow in the firelight. Night fell heavy, sleep elusive. George lay awake, staring at the rafters, replaying Dale's grin, the unmarked trail. When Alex's breathing evened, George slipped out, phone in hand. He scrolled the messages, heart sinking at the intimacy. Miss your fire, no replies from Alex, but the history spoke volumes. Deleting the thread felt like betrayal, so he powered off, returning to bed with resolve hardening. Morning dawned crisp, the forest gilded in tentative light. They broke camp early, jeep purring despite the dents, aiming for the park's north exit toward Forks. Fresh start, Alex said, hand on George's knee as they merged onto Highway 101. The road hugged the coast, glimpses of surf through gaps in the pines, radio crooning Patty Griffin about flames and forgiveness. But 10 miles in, the engine sputtered, dying with a cough. Steam hissed from the hood. Overheated, George muttered, pulling to the shoulder. They waited under a stand of alders, thumbs out for passing cars that blurred by. An hour ticked, then Dale's truck appeared, slowing with deliberate ease. Trouble again? Lady Luck's fickle with you too. George's hackles rose, but options were slim. Radiator issue. Can you call ahead? Dale nodded, radioing a mechanic in Forks, then offered a ride. In the cab, conversation veered personal. You boys together long? Dale asked, mirror reflecting his probing stare. Alex shifted. Year or so. Dale hummed. Good on you. Park's no place for lone wolves. The garage was a grease-stained haven, owner promising a fix by evening. Dale vanished after dropping them at a diner, faded Formica counters, pie under glass. Over coffee and BLTs, George pressed. Dale knows something. Alex sighed. He cornered me last night at the falls. Said he saw my Jeep earlier in the week, scouting shots, he thought. But Jay, he might have sent someone. To find me. The revelation landed like a stone. You're in danger? Here? Alex nodded grimly. I didn't want to drag you in. Thought the crash was accident. Now. George's mind raced, the deer, timed too perfectly, the texts, Dale's timely arrivals. We leave tonight. Straight to Seattle. But as they waited, a call came, a mechanic found sabotage, radiator hose slashed clean. George's blood iced. Not accident. Alex paled. Jay's work. Or Dale's. Paranoia bloomed, the diner's jukebox mocking with a twangy love song. They holed up in a motel, windows barred, taking shifts to watch the lot. George sketched escape plans on a napkin, back roads, no stops, while Alex loaded his camera with fresh film, as if documenting their peril could control it. Dusk brought the Jeep, rumbling like a wounded beast. They drove into gathering dark, coastal fog rolling thick. Headlights caught a figure on the berm, Dale, thumb out, rain-slicked. They sped past, but his truck's growl followed soon after, closing the gap. He's tailing us, Alex breathed. George floored it, curves blurring, heart in throat. The chase stretched miles, trucks beamed a relentless hunter. A straightaway loomed, George swerved onto a fire road, gravel spitting. Branches clawed the sides, Dale's rig too bulky to follow far. They burst onto a logging clickup, moon silvering stumps like gravestones. Engine whining, they pushed on, losing him in the maze. Exhausted, they pulled into a hidden pullout, killing lights. In the dark, George turned. "Tell me everything." Alex did, voice breaking. The job, a corporate rival secret snapped in shadows, Jay's betrayal when Alex refused more, the threats veiled as concern. "I ran to you," he finished. "To build something real." Tears stung George's eyes. "We fight this together." Their embrace was fierce, bodies pressed in the seat, love a defiant spark. But as dawn pinked the horizon, a distant engine revved. The mystery deepened, survival now a shared vow, betrayal's shadow lengthening. Fog clung to the Jeep's windows like a shroud as George eased onto the fire road's rutted spine, the engine's growl a low counterpoint to their ragged breaths. Alex twisted in the passenger seat, peering into the rear view, where shadows played tricks among the stumps. "Lost him," he whispered, but the words carried no conviction. George's knuckles whitened on the wheel, the clickup stretching endless under the moon's indifferent gaze, a graveyard of felled giants, their severed trunks bleaching pale. They drove in silence for what felt like eternity, the path forking unpredictably, GPS useless in the dead zone. Branches scraped the undercarriage, a nails-on chalkboard reminder of their fragility. George's mind churned, Dale's eagle tattoo, Jay's texts, the slashed hose, pieces of a puzzle refusing to align. Was this pursuit personal, or had their love unwittingly tangled in a web spun long before Seattle's rainy nights? A break in the trees revealed a faint glow, headlights. No, a ranger outpost, its lantern flickering like a beacon. George killed the engine 100 yards out, coasting silent. "Wait here," he told Alex, slipping into the night with the flashlight dimmed. The building was modest, a trailer hitched to solar panels, door ajar. Inside, maps pinned to corkboard, a cot rumpled from recent use. No one. But on the desk, a logbook, entries in neat script, the last noting unidentified vehicle, host sector, 2,200 hours. Possible poacher. George's pulse quickened. Dale? He rifled drawers, flash drives, binoculars, then froze at a photo taped under the blotter. Alex, mid-stride on a city street, camera raised, oblivious to the lens capturing him. Stalker shot, timestamped a week prior. Shit. He grabbed it, retreating to the Jeep. Alex's eyes widened at the image. Jay's handiwork. He's been tracking me. They hot-wired the outpost's ATV, desperation's gift, leaving the Jeep hidden under netting. The machine whined to life, carrying them deeper into the park's belly, toward Hurricane Ridge elevations where signal might pierce the canopy. Dawn bled pink across the ridges as they crested, Alex clinging behind, chin on George's shoulder. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" George shouted over the wind. "Shame," Alex yelled back. "Thought I could outrun it. Protect you." George's laugh was bitter, swallowed by gusts. Protection felt like isolation now, their bond tested in ways no hike or kiss could mend. At the ridge top, cell bars ghosted in, too, enough. George dialed Tessa at Calalock. "Emergency. Sabotage. Pursuit. Send help to." Static cut him, the line dying as tires crunched gravel behind. Dale's truck, emerging from mist like a spectre. "Go," Alex urged, but the ATV sputtered, fuel low. They abandoned it, scrambling into alpine meadows, wildflowers trampled underfoot. Dale's voice boomed, amplified by the bowl of the valley. "No use running, Rivera. Debts don't vanish in the woods." George pulled Alex behind a boulder cluster, hearts thundering. "He knows your name." Alex nodded, face ashen. "Jay hired him. Muscle from my San Diego mess." Pebbles skittered, Dale was closing, rifle silhouette stark against the rising sun. George scanned, sheer drop one side, scree slope the other. "We split. Draw him off." "No," Alex protested, but George was moving, tossing a rock downslope to clatter. Dale veered that way, cursing. Alex bolted opposite, toward a tree line. George followed at a crouch, lungs burning, the ridge's edge a dizzying void. Gunshot cracked, warning, or intent, echoing like judgment. They dove into conifers, needles muffling falls, emerging at a service road where a patrol jeep idled unattended. Keys in ignition, Rangers lunch on the dash. They piled in, George gunning it toward the park boundary, radio crackling to life. This is unauthorized vehicle. Pursuit in progress. Dispatch responded, sirens promised. But Dale's truck burst onto the road, ramming their bumper. Metal screamed, the jeep fishtailing. Alex braced, yelling coordinates. George swerved into a hairpin, tires smoking, buying seconds. The chase spilled onto 101, traffic sparse but building. A semi loomed, George tucked behind, Dale overtaking recklessly. Horns blared, a near miss with an RV. Then, blessedly, lights flashed blue in the mirror, park rangers, sirens wailing. Dale peeled off at the next exit, vanishing into side roads. George pulled over, shaking, as officers swarmed. Statements given, the photo shown, Tessa arrived, face grim. We'll handle Whitaker. He's got priors, poaching, assaults. They were shuttled to a safe house in Port Angeles, a bland duplex with coastal views, stock pantry, police detail outside. Adrenaline crashed, leaving George hollow. Alex paced the living room, phone confiscated for evidence. It's unraveling, he said, sinking beside George on the sagging couch. Jay's pulling strings. This started with a gig for a tech firm, snapping XX in compromising spots. I quit when it got too invasive, but Jay he felt owned. George's hand found his, interlacing fingers. Owned? By you? Alex shook his head. By the thrill. We're cut from the same cloth, chasing shadows. But you. You're light. The words bridged the chasm, if only temporarily. They ordered pizza, greasy comfort from a local joint, eating cross-legged on the floor, trading slices like peace offerings. Laughter bubbled tentative, recounting the ATV's wild ride, George's heroic rock toss. Night brought intimacy, tentative at first. In the queen bed with threadbare quilt, they undressed slowly, mapping bruises like constellations. George's fingers traced the gash on Alex's temple, now scabbing. Scars tell stories, he murmured, lips following. Alex arched, breath hitching. Ours will be epic. Love unfolded unhurried, bodies speaking what words faltered, forgiveness in caresses, trust in sighs. Afterward, tangled, George confessed his own shadows, the ex in college who outed him to frat brothers, the isolation that built his walls. You cracked them, he said. Alex kissed his collarbone. Good. Walls hide the best views. Morning delivered news, Dale apprehended at a roadblock, Jay's name surfacing in his phone logs. Warrants issued. Relief washed tentative, but George sensed undercurrents, Alex's flinches at door knocks, his habit of scanning windows. They walked the waterfront, salt air cleansing, hand swinging loose. Gulls scavenged fries from benches, tourists oblivious to their drama. What now? George asked, pausing at a bench overlooking the strait. Alex's gaze drifted to ferries cutting white wakes. I testify. End it clean. George's heart clenched. Then what? Back to Seattle, pretending. Alex turned, eyes fierce. No pretending. We build. Your co-op, my exhibit, together. The promise hung, fragile as sea foam, but George clung to it, pulling him close for a kiss that tasted a future. Afternoon waned in a bookstore cafe, nursing lattes amid dog-eared paperbacks. Alex sketched photo concepts on a napkin, queer couples against stormy skies, love's defiance. George added buildings, sustainable nests for such stories. Laughter flowed freer, plans weaving like vines. But as they returned, a unmarked sedan idled across the street, driver obscured. Paranoia? Or prelude? That night, over stir-fry from a foil packet, tension resurfaced. Alex's confession deepened. Jay wasn't just muscle, he'd been Alex's anchor after his mom's death, a toxic tether of sex and secrets. "I loved him once," Alex admitted. Falk paused. "The wrong way." You're right." George's jealousy flared, hot and irrational. "And if he wins? Drags you back?" "He won't." But doubt shadowed Alex's eyes, mirroring George's own. They argued low, voices rising like tide, accusations of secrecy clashing with pleas for faith. "You hid this world from me," George snapped. "To protect, bullshit. To control." The fight crested, words weapons, then broke in exhausted tears. Apologies murmured in the dark, bodies seeking solace, but the rift lingered, a fault line in their foundation. Dawn brought a call, Jay in custody, extradited from California. Dale spilling details, paid to scare, not harm. The nightmare fracturing. Elation surged, but George felt the cost, trust's erosion, love's bloom stained. As they packed for Seattle, Alex paused at the door. "We survived. Now we heal." George nodded, hand in hand, stepping into sun. But in the review, the sedan's ghost trailed, mystery's echo refusing silence. Their entwined path stretched ahead, scarred but unbroken, for now. The drive back to Seattle unfolded under a sky bruised purple, the Olympic Peninsula receding like a half-remembered dream. George gripped the wheel, the Jeep's repairs holding steady, but his mind raced laps around the asphalt. Alex dozed beside him, head lolled against the window, the bandage on his temple a stark white flag of surrender. Relief should have blanketed them, Jay's arrest a full stop to the chaos, yet George's chest tightened with every mile marker, the argument's echoes replaying like a loop track. They crossed the Narrows at dusk, the bridge's cables humming tension, Puget Sound a dark mirror below. Seattle's lights twinkled welcoming, but George felt the city's pulse as accusatory, horns blaring judgment, rain-slicked streets reflecting fractured trust. At his Capitol Hill apartment, the familiarity jarred, sketches pinned to walls, half-read novel on the nightstand, the scent of his cedar candle lingering. Alex dropped his bag, surveying the space like a stranger. "Home," he said, but the word wobbled. They ordered Thai from the corner spot, pad see ew and spring rolls, comforting grease and spice, eating on the couch, TV murmuring a cop show irony. Conversation skirted edges, Tessa's follow-up email confirming charges, Dale's bail denied. "It's done," Alex insisted, chopsticks pausing. George nodded, but his eye strayed to the camera bag, unpacked on the floor, lenses glinting like eyes. "Is it? What about the exhibit? Your gigs?" Alex set his plate down, leaning forward. "Pausing them. Focusing on us." The intent warmed, but George's doubt whispered, "How long?" They cleared dishes in sink, suds foaming in the sink, Alex's hip bumping George's in playful nudge. Laughter sparked, tentative, then the kiss, soft at first, deepening to anchor. In bed, bodies realigned, touches mapping apologies. George's hands roamed Alex's back, tracing the curve of spine, whispering, "Stay." Alex's reply was a gasp, a vow in motion. Morning brought routine's balm, coffee brewing, George sketching at the kitchen table while Alex scrolled job listings, ethical photo work, gallery scouting. Sun slanted through blinds, gilding the room gold. "Youth center today?" Alex asked, pouring mugs. George nodded. "Mentor session. Kids sharing coming-out stories." Pride flickered in Alex's eyes. "Take me sometime. I could shoot portraits, anonymous, empowering." The offer bridged, George's walls softening. He left for work, blueprints underarm, the co-op project humming with progress, foundations poured, queer families envisioning homes. But focus fractured, colleagues noted his distraction, the crash's phantom aches lingering in ribs and resolve. Lunch was a solo walk to Cal Anderson Park, benches alive with dog walkers and picnickers, rainbow flags fluttering defiant. George sat, journaling fragments, love as survival. Mystery as mirror. What do we reflect? Afternoon waned in meetings, but a text from Alex lit his phone. Gallery bite. Dinner to celebrate? Elation surged, plans for craft cocktails at the Baltic Room. But as George locked up, his phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Rivera owes more than you know. Watch your back. Screenshot attached. Alex, laughing with Jay in an old club photo, timestamp faded but damning. George's stomach plummeted. Hoax? Or leak from Jay's circle? He drove erratic, rain resuming in sheets, arriving at Alex's Fremont studio soaked. Alex opened the door, brow furrowed. Babe? You're early. George thrust the phone forward, words tumbling. This. Explain. Alex's face drained, scanning the image. Ancient history. Jay's revenge porn, metaphorical. He sent it to clients too. Fury boiled in George. And you didn't warn me? After everything? Alex pulled him inside, door slamming. I buried it. Therapy helped, moving on. The studio cluttered with prints, urban grit, lovers in rain. George paced amid the chaos. Burying isn't ending. It's haunting. Voices rose, accusations flying, George's control freak tendencies clashing with Alex's evasion. You architect everything. Alex shot. But love's not a blueprint. George recoiled. And you're the wildfire, burning bridges before crossing. The fight crested, George storming out into the downpour, walking aimless toward the locks where salmon leaped futile. Blocks away, regret chased, texts unsent. Hours later, soaked to marrow, he returned. Alex waited on the stoop, umbrella futile. I'm sorry, George choked, collapsing into embrace. Me too. We're scared. Inside, tea steeped, confessions flowed, George's fear of abandonment, Alex's shame spiral. Dawn found them entwined, healing's first stitch. Weeks blurred in tentative rhythm. George's co-op advanced, groundbreaking ceremony drawing local press, queer icons toasting sustainable futures. Alex landed the exhibit, shadows entwined, at a pioneer square space, prints evoking mystery and intimacy. Opening night hummed electric, wine flowing, murmurs of admiration. George stood proud, suit crisp, watching Alex work the room, charm dialed high, but as seeking his. A collector approached, voice oily. Rivera's got edge. Heard he runs with rough crowds. George's jaw tightened, but Alex diffused with wit, later whispering, ignore. Focus on us. Post-party, they crashed at George's, buzz fading to vulnerability. Proud of you, George said, unbuttoning Alex's shirt. Love unfolded languid, bodies schooled in each other's silences. But mid-gasp, Alex's phone vibrated, silenced, but insistent. He ignored, but George glimpsed the screen later, Jay out on bail. Loose ends. Panic flickered, suppressed. Crisis brewed subtly. Alex withdrew, late shoots, vague excuses. George confronted over brunch at La Peña, croissants crumbling. Talk to me. Alex sighed. Jay's lawyer called. Want to meet, clear the air. George's fork clattered. No. His poison. Alex's eyes pleaded. Closure. For us. Betrayal stung afresh, George stormed to the youth center, channeling rage into mentoring, a teen story of family rejection mirroring his own fractures. Evening brought reconciliation, Alex canceling the meet, choosing therapy instead, joint sessions booked. Progress, fragile. They hiked Discovery Park, autumn leaves carpeting paths, hands linked. Healing's non-linear, Alex said, pausing at bluffs. George nodded, wind tousling hair. Like tides. Ebb and flow. The view stretched to Olympics, mountains mocking with memory. But Jay's shadow lengthened. Anonymous emails to Alex's gallery, accusations of theft, ethics breaches. Backlash murmured, sales dipping. George rallied, networking contacts, but doubt seeded, was love enough against vendettas? One night, over bourbon neat, Alex broke. I betrayed him first, leaked a photo to protect myself. It escalated. George's world tilted. Us? Built on that? No, Alex grasped his hands. Redeemed by this. Tears shared, forgiveness forged in raw honesty. They volunteered together at the center, Alex's portraits capturing kids' resilience, eyes bright with unspoken stories. Community knit them tighter, love's web expanding. Winter crept, holidays looming. George's family visited, mom hugging Alex fierce, Boise warmth thawing Seattle chill. Dinner tales flowed, childhood Thanksgivings, queer kinships. But New Year's Eve, at a rooftop party overlooking the Space Needle, Jay appeared, uninvited, gaunt in the crowd. Rivera, he slurred, eyes venomous. Stole my light. Security dragged him, but the encounter scarred George's arm around Alex protective. Aftermath, police reports, restraining orders. In bed that night, George held Alex through tremors. He's gone. Alex nodded into his neck. But the fear. Love's response, slow dances in the kitchen to Coulter Wall, bodies swaying to ballads of outlaws and redemption. Spring bloomed, co-op roofs rising, Alex's next series, Entwined Roots, exploring survival's scars. Yet crisis crested unexpected, a letter from Jay's lawyer, settlement demand veiled threat. Alex crumpled it, face crumpling. I can't. George decided, we face it. Together. Court dates loomed, but in prep, they wrote vows, private, binding. In mystery, we find truth. In fight, our strength. Love, tested, deepened, roots entwining against storms. As summer hinted, they planned a return, Olympic, cautious. Reclaim it, George said. Alex smiled, true. But whispers persisted, Jay's allies. Or ghosts. Their story, half told, pulsed with potential, survival's fight yielding to healing's grace. Summer's haze settled over Seattle like a lover's breath, humid and insistent, as George and Alex steered the new SUV, practical, armored with all-wheel drive, back toward Olympic's emerald embrace. The co-op's ribbon cutting had been a triumph 2 weeks prior, families moving into sunlit homes designed for stories like theirs, queer elders with adopted kids, trans couples planting victory gardens. George's speech had drawn cheers, Alex's candid shots immortalizing the joy. But beneath the applause, tension simmered, Jay's settlement rejected in court, his appeals exhausted, yet anonymous notes still slipped under doors, entwined forever. George glanced at Alex, humming to Fleet Foxes on the stereo, his profile softened by sun through the visor. The limp from the crash had faded, but emotional scars lingered, therapy sessions twice weekly, where Alex unpacked the wildfire within, George his steady compass. You okay? George asked, hand squeezing thigh. Alex turned, smile genuine. Yeah. Reclaiming. The word was mantra now, etched in the tattoos they'd gotten post-verdict, interlocked roots on wrists, inked in a Capitol Hill parlor amid laughter and tears. They booked the same A-frame, Tessa's endorsement sealing it, parks safer than your city dramas. Arrival stirred ghosts, the porch where they'd tangled, lake mirroring calm they'd fought for. Unpacking, Alex set up his tripod immediately, capturing golden hour on the water. No filters this time, he said. Raw us. Dinner was fresh salmon grilled dockside, sides of forage berries, wine uncorked to toasts, to survival sequel. Night unfolded tender, bodies reacquainting in the clawfoot tub, steam curling like secrets released. George's fingers traced Alex's ribs, counting breaths. Missed this piece. Alex's eyes, hazel fleck brown, held his. Earned it. Love's rhythm built slow, waves lapping outside echoing their sighs, climax a shared release, tears mingling with sweat, vulnerability's peak. Morning hikes resumed, gentler paths to Solduck hot springs, where geothermal pools steamed inviting. They soaked side by side, minerals easing aches, conversation meandering, Alex's San Diego youth, surfing at dawn to escape stepdad's disdain, George's Boise winters, ice skating ponds dreaming of cities kinder to his heart. You were always out there, Alex said, head on George's shoulder. I was hiding in plain sight. Afternoon brought kayaks again, but a squall rolled in sudden, wind-whipping whitecaps. They beached hasty on a cove, rain lashing as they huddled under a torp. Laughter bubbled at first, drenched like drowned rats, then deepened to truths. Jay's last letter, Alex admitted, voice rain-muffled. He wrote from lockup. Apology, sort of. Blamed the game. George stiffened. And you believe? Alex shook head. No. But it humanizes. Like us, flawed, fighting. The storm passed, sun-piercing clouds in biblical shafts. They drove to Hurricane Ridge, the site of their ATV escape, now a picnic spot with vistas unmarred. Cheese and crackers spread on a blanket, Alex snapped portraits, George against wildflowers, expression unguarded, love's light in his gaze. My muse, Alex murmured, kissing the viewfinder. George's heart swelled, but a hiker nearby, a bearded, fleeting, stirred unease. Echo of Dale? Paranoia, banished with a shrug. Back at the cabin, evening fire crackled stories. George shared youth center tales, a kid's first pride march, flags waving triumph. Alex contributed prints for the walls, anonymous faces blooming resilient. Intimacy followed, urgent on the rug, firelight dancing skin, gasps harmonizing with pops. Post-coitus, tangled, George voiced the unvoiced, marry me. Alex stilled, then grinned. Thought you'd never blueprint it. Rings promised, not yet bought, vows verbal, binding. But intrusion came midnight, cabin door rattling, shadow fleeing into dark. George bolted up, grabbing the poker. Stay, he hissed to Alex, flashlight-piercing night. Footprints in mud, shallow, a note pinned to the welcome mat, love's a trap. Untwine or break. Jay's hand? Or fanatic? They called Tessa, patrol sweeping fruitless. Sleep evaded, bodies spooned vigilant. Dawn's patrol confirmed, no leads, but increased watches. Enjoy, Tessa urged. Don't let fear win. They did, fiercely, trail runs where Alex outpaced, teasing George's dad bod, stargazing with a telescope borrowed from the outpost, constellations mapping futures. One night, over Moors, Alex confessed deeper betrayal, not Jay's, but his own. Before the trip, I almost bailed. Thought my mess would drown you. George's throat tightened. You stayed. That's the choice. Crisis peaked on day 4, a hike to Mary Mere Falls, path familiar. Midway, Alex paused, face paling. That rock, where Dale appeared. Ghosts conjured, panic rising. Then, rustle, a figure emerged, rifle slung. Not Dale, but a ranger, young and apologetic. Patrol. Sorry. Relief laughed out, but Alex trembled after George's arm anchor. At the falls, mist cloaking, they faced it, we're stronger scarred, George said. Alex nodded, kissing fierce. Entwined deeper. Return to Seattle brought normalcy's rush, co-op open house, families baking pies in communal kitchens, Alex's exhibit extension, crowds praising authenticity. But the note haunted, anonymous mail to the gallery echoing threats. George hired a PI, ethical, local, a Latina named Maria with sharp eyes and sharper questions. Findings, Jay's cell block whispers, a cousin loose in Washington, grudge nursed. Confrontation brewed at a queer film fest in Capitol Hill, after-party buzzing. The cousin, lean, tattooed, cornered Alex in the alley, word slurred venom, he rots for you. George intervened, shoving between, fists clenched. Brawl averted by bouncers, police called. In the squad car, Alex shook. It's endless. George held him. No. We end it. Therapy intensified, sessions dissecting betrayal's roots, Alex's flight response, George's builder's rigidity. Breakthroughs came, letters unwritten to Jay, burned in the co-op's fire pit, ashes to wind. Community rallied, youth center fundraisers, Alex's portraits auctioned for legal fees. Love manifested communal, potlucks with chosen family, dances where bodies pressed free. Autumn deepened, leaves turning crimson mirrors to their passion. George's proposal formalized, ring simple, silver with root engravings, presented at Discovery Park Bluffs, waves crashing below. Alex's yes was tear-choked, kiss salt-sprayed. Planning whispers, small ceremony, Vermont cabin, kin invited. Yet climax loomed, cousins arrest, plot to vandalize the exhibit uncovered. Court again, testimonies laced with fire, George's steady recount, Alex's raw vulnerability. Verdict, conspiracy charges, threat neutralized. Elation crashed in aftershock, we won, Alex breathed in the courthouse hall, collapsing into George. Survived. Healing's arc bent gentle, winter wedding in Vermont, snow blanketing evergreens, vows exchanged under strung lights. George's mom teared, Alex's stepdad absent but forgiven in absentia. Honeymoon in Montana's glacier, trails unscarred, love's narrative rewritten. Back home, co-op thrived, Alex's book deal, Entwined, chronicling anonymized truths. But humaneness deepened in quiet, mentoring side by side, a kid's coming out mirrored in their story. You saved me, the teen said. George smiled at Alex across the circle. We saved each other. Love, once mystery's prey, now its teller, romantic, resilient, rooted. Vermont's winter mantle lay soft and unforgiving, snow drifts sculpting the landscape into a hush of whites and greys, as George and Alex exchanged rings under the arched boughs of a sugar maple, its bare branches etched like veins against the overcast sky. The officiant, a queer elder from the local Unitarian fellowship with silver hair and a voice like aged whiskey, bound their hands with a silk cord dyed in rainbow hues. In the face of storms weathered and shadows banished, she intoned, "Do you vow to entwine, to endure?" George's "I do" came steady, eyes locked on Alex's, the man who'd unraveled him and rewoven stronger. Alex's response trembled with joy, the cord tightening as cheers erupted from their circle, the 30 souls, a mosaic of Seattle kin and Boise transplants, bundled in wool and wonder. The reception spilled into a rented barn, lanterns swaying from rafters, tables groaning under potluck bounty, George's mom's venison stew simmered with herbs from her garden, Alex's step-aunt's tamales wrapped in corn husks, vegan charcuterie from Capitol Hill friends. Folk tunes twanged from a fiddler's bow, bodies swaying loose, queer waltzes improvised, laughter cutting the chill. George pulled Alex to the hay-strewn floor, hands at waist, whispering amid spins, "Husband." The word bloomed new, a root-taking soil. Honeymoon called them west to Montana's Glacier National Park, where peaks gnawed at clouds and going to the sun road wound like a promise kept. Their cabin perched on Swift Current Lake, windows framing grizzlies foraging at dawn, the air pine-sharp and alive. Mornings dawned with coffee on the deck, steam mingling with mist, Alex's camera capturing George's sleep-tousled form against the water's gleam. "My forever frame," he'd say, lens lingering on the ring's glint. Hikes traced high trails, boots crunching talus, breath sinking to the ascent. At Hidden Lake Overlook, turquoise meltwater sprawled below, George paused, backpack slung, turning to Alex. "Here, in this wild, I see us, raw, relentless." Alex nodded, wind rifling his hair, pulling him close for a kiss that tasted of altitude and absolution. Picnics unfolded on lichened rocks, sandwiches of wild smoked trout, huckleberries tart on tongues, stories unfurling like the valleys. Alex shared visions of a family, adoption papers in motion, a child to inherit their entwined legacy. George dreamed aloud of expansions, co-ops in Boise, Portland, sanctuaries woven nationwide. Intimacy deepened in the cabin's loft, fire roaring below, furs piled high. Bodies explored with marital leisure, fingers charting new territories of trust, moans harmonizing with wind's howl. One night, post-climax, Alex traced George's compass tattoo, faded but fervent. Direction found. George smiled, vulnerability cresting. "In you." Return to Seattle heralded spring's riot, cherry blossoms powdering streets, the co-op's gardens bursting green. George's firm promoted him, sustainable designs gracing billboards, Alex's book launch packed the gallery, Entwined shelved beside Baldwin and Monet, readers weeping at pages of peril-turned poetry. But humaneness bloomed personal, therapy tapered, replaced by monthly check-ins, scars honored not hidden. Crisis's final echo arrived subtle, a letter from Jay, forwarded from lockup, postmarked Tacoma. Alex opened it alone at first, in the youth center's quiet office, George's portraits watching from walls. Words scrawled shaky, I see now. Your light blinded mine. Forgive, if you can. No demands, just regrets raw edge. Alex shared it over dinner, pad thai steaming, candles flickering, tears salting noodles. He was broken. Like I was. George folded him close. Unhealed, like we are. Betrayal's ghost exorcised, they channeled forward a scholarship fund in the center's name, for queer youth fleeing shadows. Galas raised thousands, Alex's speeches searing, love isn't survival's prize, it's the fight itself. George's arm around him unstage, pride swelling communal. Summer solstice brought their first anniversary, celebrated on Olympics shores, tent pitched at Kalaloch, waves serenading. No notes, no tales, just them, roasting marshmallows, rings catching firelight. From romantic trip to this, George toasted. Alex clinked bottles. Mystery made us. Lovemaking on the beach, sand gritting skin, stars witnesses to gasps and grips. Autumn deepened commitments, adoption home study, paperwork a labyrinth of hopes. Winter's eve, snow dusting Capitol Hill, they hosted kin, stories swapped till dawn, a family forged in fractures mended. George's mom raised a glass, to roots that hold. Alex's eyes met George's across the table, love's language fluent. Years layered like sediment, a son arrived, Elias, dark curls and hazel mischief, adopted from Seattle's foster weave. His laughter filled the co-op flat, walls echoing with first words, dada, jewel and delighted. Alex's lens captured milestones, book 2 birthed, roots entwined, dedications to Elias, to kin. Challenges came gentle now, works whirl, Elias's tantrums, anniversaries marked amid chaos. But core held, date nights at the Baltic, hands linked in parks, therapy's toolkit for storm small. Jay's release passed unmarked, a footnote in newsprint, Alex sent a card, unsigned, closure's quiet gift. Old age crept kind, silver threading hair, co-op expanded to Vermont, Boise, legacies living. Elias grew queer curious, mentored by dad's tales. On a Montana revisit, grizzled now, George and Alex hiked slow, canes tapping, lake unchanged. Full circle, Alex wheezed, bench-bound. George leaned close. Entwined eternal. Death came entwined, Alex first, pneumonia swift in their 80s, George at bedside, hand clasped, whispers of wildfires tamed. George's vigil lingered months, then joined, heart quiet in sleep, Elias and grandkids near. Grave side by side in Seattle's queer cemetery, roots literal under sod, stones engraved, lovers, survivors, lights.